Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Ad Age's custom webcast sponsored by Draftfcb. The topic of today's webcast is Shift, How Consumer Behavior with Mobile Technology is Changing the Game for Retail and Brand Marketing. I'm Bob Norp, and I'll be your moderator for today. Now, we have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We will hear from today's presenters, and then we'll open the floor up to your questions. To participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the presentation window, and then click the Submit button. You may submit the questions at any time during the webcast, and we will address as many questions as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Now, if you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webcast help guide by clicking the Help link below the video window. Now let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to our presenters for today. First up, we have Patrick Moorhead. He is Senior Vice President, Group Management Director of Mobile Platforms at Draftfcb Chicago, and Chris Miller, Executive Vice President, Group Management Director of Digital at Draftfcb Chicago. And first up, our first presenter will be Chris. So Chris, if you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Bob. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. As Bob said, we're going to cover a dive into looking at the mobile space. And first, I think as we look at what's going on mobile, we wanted to look at some broader trends that are happening, which are really leading us to why we think mobile is such an important focus. The first is that digital is really not one size fits all. There are some broad themes that are across that, and specifically why today we're looking a lot at the U.S. We also want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the global space. Being an agency with a global footprint and global clients, we think it's always important to look globally when you act locally. So there's a couple of trends we're going to talk about here. First being mobile is king, a little bit about social, e-shopping, the digital giants that are really dominating the landscape, and then as ad spending continues to rise. I'm just going to make sure my slides are all set here. So the first is, as we look at the space, right? So if we look at Europe, Japan, Australia, mobile is not just a fast rising star. It's really king a lot of the spaces, especially in the developing markets. People are really skipping, as we see in the U.S., going from desktop to mobile, are skipping that and just going right to mobile as they're grabbing and moving into the space. So you can see the growth curve that we're seeing, for instance, in Indonesia, which is an interesting market to look at, how the mobile growth is really being driven, not surprisingly, by the young audience, but that's their foray into the digital space, and specifically social, where in many cases carriers are offering things like Facebook for free. Next is if we look at social. So social as a connection is really driving our online behavior. So as you think about social networking as everywhere, mobile then becomes a connection point that I can be everywhere while I'm socially connected with my friends. And you're going to hear a little bit of that theme later as Patrick talks about how location starts to take place in that. But then those are connecting into whether it's Facebook, RenRen, Orkut, Twitter, the various global platforms, but then also the more country-specific platforms as well. E-shopping, of course, we've just seen Groupon go public here fairly recently, and being in Chicago, they're a hometown company for us. But while we've seen in developed markets, e-shopping and e-commerce is certainly there, the lines are really blurring, and in developing markets, we're seeing while maybe online shopping is not happening yet, or it's growing, it's really influencing the offline transactions. So we're seeing those same behavior curves in developing markets that we saw in developed markets, and from an e-shopping side, and even from some of the deal shopping that we're seeing. So, for example, Argentina being one of a top market for Groupon. Next is really just the digital giants dominating the global landscape, and no, we weren't paid to put any of the brands here. But if you look at what's really happening with these large footprints, you're seeing sort of a giant scale, one that the internet gives us, but two, what's happening with these broad-based platforms. So when you're looking at a digital strategy and start to look at mobile, there are some key players you can start to look at, especially if you're newer to the space. Then as you start to move into a little bit more, you really can start to get more not only country-specific but platform-specific as well. But we think as a starter, because we're assuming a lot of people on our call today may be newer to doing work in the mobile space, you can really start to look at some of the broad-based pieces to give you broad either national or even international reach. And next, I think something probably near and dear to all of our hearts is just the digital ad spend continues to rise. So we're seeing that across the board through various countries and regions that the spend is moving over. And I think anecdotally, we've also seen clients, as we're all in 2012 planning, looking at increasing spend into the digital space and then specifically into the mobile space as a part of that as well, recognizing the opportunities that are there. So what we're really here to talk about today is mobile. And we're going to talk about mobile as the first screen, so really moving from that third screen into the first screen. And I think you see some of the numbers here to back that up, just the sheer number of handsets, that subscriptions that we're seeing. Mobile web traffic continues to increase. Mobile is not because of that, mobile is not something that's really optional for consumers. I mean, I think if you ask somebody, would you leave your wallet at home or your phone? It's probably going to be your wallet, or you're going to turn right back around and grab your phone. So if it's not optional for consumers, it can't be optional for brands. So we really think that mobile is moving from the third screen to that first screen. And then you're also seeing that from the sales data, right? So in terms of everybody who's buying phones, not just in 2011, but projected here by eMarketer through 2012. So I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, who's going to talk to you about how to think about mobile.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for a great setup, and thanks everybody who's on the call for joining us. It's easy to look at a ton of data when we talk about mobile, and all the data is really exciting. All the charts point north, and they point that way for a long, long time in the future. But I think where we're finding some of the challenges in working with our clients and some other agencies is what to do about that. So I hear this a lot. People say, well, Pat, I get it. There's tons of phones. Subscriptions are going up. Mobile web traffic is doubling. Everything that Chris talked about and some of those bigger trends. But what should we actually do about it? So that's what we're going to spend a little time on. We think that being mobile for a brand really has three components to it. It has to do with being bite-sized, it has to do with being highly relevant, and it has to be easy to get into and easy to get out of for a consumer. So kind of here's what I mean by that. Bite-sized means that we're not going to try to take everything that you may have developed on your online site and squish it down into the phone experience. Part of the challenge for delivering mobile to the consumer is understanding the specific need state of a person on a device and then identifying in your online digital asset library, tools, content, experiential components, branding components. What is it that consumers really going to want from my brand or my service, and getting them there first? I think that is the relevancy piece. Mobile has a really high relevancy mandatory on it in the sense that people expect a ton of value out of the experiences they get from their mobile device. So if you're not really focusing in on specifically what a mobile user is going to want to be doing with your service or with your brand at that moment in time, sometimes at that location or around a certain product, you run the risk of alienating them. And then lastly, the easy in, easy out point is we have to make extra sure, I think, in mobile that there is not an impression from the consumer's mind that they had to work really hard to get something from our brands when they experience us on mobile, and that they're not going to have to reduplicate that hard work if they did it to get back there later. So there really is an expectation on the phone of I'm able to click once or twice and get exactly what I need. And we know that mobile consumers are often not focused on the phone, ironically. They're doing something else. They're going someplace. They're waiting for someone. They're driving, although you shouldn't drive with a mobile. but you might be riding in a car or in a taxi cab or a variety of other things. So your attention's really split when you're looking at your device. And I think we need to be sensitive to that when we start to plan experiences for our consumers and make it easy for them to get in and make it easy to get out and kind of as guilt-free and transparent and seamless as possible. So as an example of somebody who I think is doing that, and I'm not going to call out American Airlines as being the perfect example of this, but I think if you look at their properties, it really makes the point quite exactly that I'm trying to make. So on the left you see a screenshot of the AmericanAirlines.com homepage, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's obviously your travel and booking planning tools on the right-hand side. There's also, plan your Caribbean vacation and vacation packages, and then down the left-hand side there's affiliate offers for all of their car rental partners and hotel partners, and there's manage your rewards point account, right? And there's a ton of functionality, and that's really online where they're surfacing the majority of their e-business. If you look at the right-hand side, it's a screenshot of what they're doing on the phone, and I think whether they know it or not, they are executing quite well against this idea of bite-sized, relevant, and disposable. So they're understanding that the need state of American Airlines consumer on the device really has to do with that day of travel. So it's going to be just restricting the content experience to an easy, simple interface. It's going to load fast. It automatically loads to my device because they've detected I'm coming from a device. So it's easy to get in to the mobile experience. I don't have to visit the .com first and then find my way to the mobile content. And then the content that's there is really going to be a limited set of tools from online that are helping me with my current need state as a mobile user. I want to check into my flight, I want to check on my seat, potentially change my seat, find out what gate the flight's leaving from, get my mobile boarding pass if that's a service that's offered, upgrade my reservation, change my flight potentially, and peek in at my my rewards club account because I might be able to use that to get into a frequent flyers club like an Admirals club or something like that. I think there probably was a lot of debate about this when it was implemented at American Airlines. I can't say that I've spoken to anyone there, so I'm speculating. But I'm sure there was a contingent at the table as these decisions were made that said, hey, wait a minute, I bet some people are going to want to plan their Caribbean getaway from the phone. And I'm sure there was some debate about that. But I think they decided correctly that even though there may be a segment of consumers that are interested in using the American Airlines site to plan their Caribbean vacation on their phone, the vast majority of their customers were going to be much more satisfied with a limited experience that was sensitive to their need state as travelers. So we think that around those three pillars of how to kind of think about fitting your brand into the mobile experience, there's another thing that we need to think about to be successful, and that is that the pace of technology in mobile and especially the innovation cycle in mobile is extraordinarily fast. It continues to get faster. It seems like every day there's an announcement almost about, there's a new operating system, here's a new app, here's a new handset, here's a new handset capability. And the technology array and the speed of it can become dizzying to understand. But what we know from our business in advertising is that human behavior doesn't actually change all that much over the same periods of time. So people tend to kind of want the same things. They tend to kind of act the same way. Often they act crazy, more often than not. But those behaviors in that consumer are much more trackable than the rapid pace of technology evolution. The result of the technology evolution is that mobile is really a Swiss Army knife digital tool. And what I mean by that is that each of us chooses a device based on certain criteria, whether it's price or carrier, or we like a physical keyboard or a touch keyboard, or we like the way the ringtone sounds, or whatever it is. And then once we adopt that device into our life, we start to customize the services on it in a way that suits our individual needs. That can be incredibly complex to understand from a technology point of view. With now, I think we're tracking 9,000 handsets across the globe and an incredibly fragmented OS landscape. But if we just look at behavior, we start to understand that we can get away with paying less attention to the technology, and I certainly wouldn't advocate stopping to follow the technology advancements. But I think when we start to develop strategy to execute, we want to pay much more attention to the human behavior factors that are going in. So this slide is an example of that, where you have three very different consumer segments that are all using the same phone. They've all got the BlackBerry curve, and you can see how that younger teenage demographic, really using it for media consumption. So I want to listen to music, I want to connect with my bands, I want to watch videos, and I want to watch YouTube and things like that. Versus more of that sweet spot 20-something demographic who's really about social, using Foursquare and Facebook, multiple email accounts, and Twitter, and texting all the time. Versus maybe a slightly more mature demographic who's using the same device but really using it in a productivity way, accessing documents and working with a corporate email account, potentially working with calendars and scheduling teams, and maybe using voice a lot more than the others. So again, I'm painting in broad strokes, and these certainly aren't super refined demographic slices, but I think the point is it's way more valuable when planning strategy to look at how the people are using the devices than what the devices themselves can do. So the next question that logically comes up in this conversation is, okay, Pat, I get it. We can be bite-sized, relevant, disposable. We'll look and make some choices about our online content. And I see your point about the Swiss Army knife. So, okay, we'll start to make those choices based on the behavioral demographic information that we have about our consumers and not selecting platforms and technologies right out of the gate. But what actually are we going to do then? And so a strategy that's worked quite well for us has been this idea of time killers versus time savers. And those of you that have heard me present are probably sick of hearing this by now. But for those that haven't, the basic idea here is that there really are only a couple of need states for the user on the phone if you get right down to it. People either want to get something done really fast, or they want to occupy some spare minutes of time in their day that the device provides an easy strategy for kind of entertainment or content consumption or entertainment or those kind of things. So we start to bucket those out into two categories, time killers and time savers. And my challenge to brands and advertising agencies has been, I bet you that you can't tell me that you can't provide one or the other of these things via the mobile experience to your consumers. And oftentimes, actually, brands have the opportunity to provide both. And that's where things start to get really interesting, is in the commingling of what are some tools that as a brand we can provide to a consumer to help them shop better, find our stores, compare prices, accomplish a task in their life. Or on the flip side, are there things about our experience digitally from a content point of view that we can package in that bite-sized, relevant, easy, and kind of way so that when someone's curious to learn more, they have the option to do that as well. So that doesn't just have to be about game playing. I think that's a neat white space for brands to start thinking about. It's not a time to put your whole product catalog in front of the consumer, but maybe strategic choices and editorializing key products that you're featuring or key elements of your digital content that might be useful to a digital consumer, or that's a good place for those to happen. Sorry, I had a little thing. At Draftfcb, we use a communications planning tool that we call the Consumer Decision Journey. It's actually a tool that was developed by McKinsey that we employ quite usefully in our practice of planning. And the goal of the consumer decision journey is really to try to evolve the way that we look at the decision cycle and the purchase funnel for the consumer, and try to move away from thinking of that as a top-down linear strategy that begins with awareness and ends with a purchase or with retention, actually to try and evolve it and look at it as a cycle where we have the opportunity to remain relevant and to figure out different ways to impact the consumer with different communications. So what I've done here is actually used our consumer decision journey tool and tried to plot against it some examples of where mobile can start to play in and around the consumer's journey from consideration to purchase and then beyond. So you see on the left-hand side of the consumer decision journey is that initial consideration set. That can be everything from my car just broke down, I need a new car, all the way to I just ate an onion sandwich for lunch and got to go buy a pack of gum, right? So the CDJ, as we call it, can kind of scale across that. In initial consideration, that's typically where we would talk about advertising, television, out-of-home, breakthrough kind of disruptive advertising that can get into the consideration set of the consumer and make our brand a choice among the choice set that they're looking at. And I think the technologies in mobile that can do that tend to be messaging, but much more they tend to be about search, They tend to be about mobile display, particularly geolocated mobile display. And social media lives there, and Chris will talk about that a little bit later. As a consumer moves through the path to purchase into that active evaluation cycle, that's where I'm saying, okay, so I'm at the store in front of the gum rack. What gum am I going to choose for my onion breath? This is where some different mobile technologies can start to play a role. So maps and geolocation services clearly are factoring in here, because the question not only is what am I going to buy, but where can I buy it, and how to buy it, right? So search and maps and geographic things starting to play a role. Then as you get to the moment of purchase where I'm going to actually put money on the table and buy something, interacting with the product and the store where the product is sold is becoming an opportunity for mobile. So that's where you see the growth of QR codes. You see regular barcode scanning technologies coming online, comparison shopping tools that work at the store level, starting to play a role in what gets purchased and how it gets purchased. And you'll notice I put the Google Wallet icon in there because the phone is even playing a role in how the purchase takes place from a transactional point of view. Then as you move past the purchase, that's our opportunity for what many people would call CRM. We just call it engagement. That's where we have an opportunity to deepen our relationship with the consumer who's selected our product by reinforcing our value, by introducing new products, treating them special, all the things that you want to do to try to maintain loyalty in a consumer. And I think there you see a stratification of mobile technologies like messaging, applications, email we're increasingly seeing as a mobile tool. And the relationship between messaging and email both being consumed on the mobile device as being a really clear opportunity to remain relevant to the consumer post-purchase. The last bit of the consumer decision journey is the loyalty loop, and that quite literally is where we try to develop a relationship with the consumer where we're getting them to skip over going back to the default initial consideration set of considering a number of different options for a particular purchase, and actually, because we've developed a loyalty relationship with them, move directly back to purchasing our brand. And there again, I think good search and location strategy can help, and clearly that's where mobile apps are playing a role as well. So kind of another way to look at that, I know the consumer decision journey is new to some people, and it's not always totally clear. It does take some study to understand, and I do encourage you to do that if that's the first time you've seen it. But just to be a little more direct about what I'm saying, I've picked out kind of 5 key marketing challenges that I think most agencies and brands face with their consumers, and what can mobile do for those, right? So clearly there's a lot of clutter in the messaging marketplace between brands, and it doesn't really matter what channel you play in. There's always going to be kind of noise in the channel. And I think mobile has an interesting way to break through because it's so personal, because the relationship between the consumer and their device is a one-on-one relationship. And so understanding how content strategy in terms of what content your target consumer is looking at and how they want to search for more information when they find your product between mobile display and search clearly can be a way to break through. Closing sales, really finding a way to be relevant to that purchasing consumer towards the right-hand side of the CDJ, whether it's helping them make an informed decision or actually helping them move towards purchase, that can play a critical role. Obviously, that whole bottom half of the CDJ, really driving loyalty. I think what we're seeing is as we evolve our mobile offerings from just kind of 1.0 versions of just being there to 2.0 and 3.0 footprints for our brands, the ability to kind of personalize and continue a conversation that's highly relevant with the consumer and driving that loyalty can have a big impact on how the brand is perceived and ultimately on sales. A great way within that loyalty loop is to introduce new products, right? So that's a client who has one particular item or one particular line, and they're looking for ways to do a line extension or to open up a new line of business for the consumer. Having that channel on mobile open from a CRM and loyalty point of view is great for seeding new products in a way that's going to be super effective because you've got it with loyal consumers who are very personally connected to it. And then finally, we think that, creating advocacy, which is that long-range relationship that you have with the consumer over time, is really about facilitating their love of your brand, and that's where social really comes into play. And Chris will kind of dive into that a little bit more down the road. So for the next section, I kind of want to talk about a couple of considerations in mobile that we think are important competencies to be looking at developing for agencies and brands as we move into the first screen mobile age of the next couple of years. The big one for me is location. And you hear a lot of talk today in the marketplace about location services, geo-targeted display advertising, geo-fenced text message alert campaigns, GPS-enabled mobile apps, and geography everywhere. But if you listen to all the conversation, what they're talking about is the what, which is, hey, we can use geographic location as a factor in how we message. But my question has always been why? Why does it matter? Why is location so important? Why is everyone so focused on it? The answer is pretty simple. It's that human beings are crazy and irrational creatures, and we make crazy decisions all the time. They don't often make sense, and that part of our job as marketers is to understand how humans are crazy and in specific ways that they're crazy. One of the ways that we're crazy is that we're addicted to now. We're very much inclined to choose options that are closer into being able to be useful to me here as opposed to in the near future. So we do a lot of work with behavioral economics, and we have good relationships. We even have the Draftfcb Decision-Making Institute, which kind of specifically focuses on things like this. And what we learn out of that study is that human beings are great at long-range strategic planning. So probably most people have a retirement account of some kind set up for themselves. But what we often don't realize is that for many people, setting up that retirement account can take almost 18 months to 2 years after you start a new job, because it's really hard for us to think short-term about long-term. So another example of that is what you see on the slide, which is if I give the average person a choice between $100 right now or $200 next week, our research indicates that most people would take the $100 right now, because why should I wait 7 days? I'd rather just have the money right now. If you offer someone $100 right now or $200 next month, they often will wait to get the $200 next month. Why? Because it's a much longer range. It's so far away it doesn't actually impact me right now. So in that way, human beings are very much like pigeons. You never see a pigeon find a cracker on the sidewalk and actually consciously decide to walk away from the cracker thinking that it's going to be there later. Pigeons are very instinctual, irrational, and they find a cracker, they eat a cracker. And in many ways, human decision-making is like that as well. So now you're wondering, why is he talking about pigeons in a mobile presentation about location? Well, here's why. We think that because humans are addicted to now, because we're much more inclined to choose things that are close in to us and useful to us right now as opposed to long range, that the mobile device is really facilitating that behavior, and it's a behavior that we're calling me here now. The smartphone, and specifically mapping and location services on the phone, have changed the way that we look at ourselves, and now we all look at ourselves at some level as that blue dot in the center of the map. That's the representation of me in the digital world. And the phone's job is to organize all the rest of the digital information that's really hard to understand into a lens that allows me to say, what do I want right here at this moment, standing right in this physical location? And that's very much like a pigeon as well. So we've been working with a partner called Placecast. They're a great location services platform. We've done a few pilot programs with them and really excited about some of the tools they're offering. One of them is a solution called LocalBox, which I just thought it was important to highlight for a couple of reasons. One is you can say, okay, I get it, location's important, but what do I do about it? Well, this is a way to start. So if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see an example of where a bunch of different services may have location information about your brand. The problem there is that a lot of times those systems are not talking to each other, and the information that represents your location information in those systems is not entirely accurate. So, for example, a user may have created a Foursquare check-in location for your brand, but now Foursquare has 6 different versions of that. One of them has the address wrong, one of them doesn't have a phone number, one of them calls your restaurant Joe's and it's actually called Jim's, and they're all actually about the same place, right? Whereas Facebook may have the correct name and geographic geographic latitude, longitude coordinate of your restaurant right, but the physical address and zip code in their listing is wrong. So because those systems don't talk to each other, that can be incredibly complex to manage. And if you think about the amount of location data across those different systems that's out there, it's actually a fairly big chunk of information that right now is unwieldy and difficult to manage. So the local box solution is one that we're playing with, which seeks to kind of normalize that data. So we create pipelines into those systems. We load what we know about our own geographic footprint per particular brand, call it a restaurant brand. LocalBox will then go out and grab all the data from those systems, location data, compare it to our own record of what we think our location data is, and normalize it and try to resolve all those conflicts, and then push it back out to those systems so that no matter what system a consumer happens to choose to use to interact with you on a location basis, we know that there's consistency in the physical information. It also creates an opportunity to provide consistency at the brand level. So now we're able to make sure that our messaging is streamlined across those systems as consumers interact with us in that me, here, now way, as well as the address and the phone number and the name of the restaurant are correct. So what's really neat about that is now we're able to get into a situation where we can start to combine those location technologies that the consumer is using in a way that can start to unlock super value for the consumer if that's appropriate. And it's really kind of a way to work, again, if you think about that CDJ, work into that active consideration phase and potentially also into that loyalty phase at the bottom of the loop. So here in Chicago, one of our favorite lunch stops over at the Hancock Tower is the Wow Bao, which is kind of a hot Asian buns restaurant. They're chuckling as I say hot Asian buns. And what you see them doing here is really clever, right? They're starting to take this local box approach where if you check in on one service, Foursquare, you unlock a specific value. If you tweet about it, you unlock another value. If you check in on Facebook, you unlock another value. If you start combining those services together, though, you really start to level up in terms of what they're willing to do for you. So in the example here, you see a Facebook check-in and a Foursquare check-in combined, really getting a lot of free Wow Bao for me at my lunch break, which is exciting. The question naturally comes up, why are they doing that? Well, what they started to realize is that every consumer that checks in on one of those services creates a ripple out into their social network on that platform and potentially across others. If you're like me, I check in on Foursquare and it automatically goes to my Twitter account. So every check-in matters to them from a free advertising point of view, and it matters that the check-in is linked to that specific location because my friends want to know, A, that I'm going to Wow Bao, but then B, which one, right? So it's just an example. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it starts to show you the potential of how normalizing and getting control over your location data can start to unlock some really interesting things for the consumer in terms of value and in terms of loyalty for the brand. Sorry. The other thing we know about location is that search is playing a huge role. This is Google information. 95% of smartphone users actively use local search. There's two reasons for that. One is that when you search on Google from your phone, it defaults to local search. So, okay, that makes sense. But then two, most of the time when you search on your phone, you're actually looking for something right now. And that, to me, reinforces the me, here, now kind of behavior with the phone. And what's really cool about that for brands is that 88% of those searchers take action within the same day. So again, a proof point about when we're using the phone really in a location way, we're really trying to solve something quickly for ourselves right now because we want to do something right now. And it's very much that addicted to now and me, here, now type worldview. Here we're just looking at some quick data about the role that the phone begins to play in the shopping experience. It shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. Smartphones play a huge role in the purchase of products out in the world. Right now they're Right now, they're playing a role largely at the beginning. So again, on the left-hand side of the consumer decision journey, they're searching, they're looking for deals. But we see increasingly the behavior moving to the right side of these numbers as well. So in the store, the phone is playing a role, whether it's interacting with products, checking prices, getting more information, comparing products to each other. And at the end, we're starting to see that column really tick up, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. But the phone increasingly playing a role not only in how I find my way to a product, but how I actually acquire it in a purchasing way. This data shouldn't be surprising to anyone either. Some survey data. Have you ever made a purchase decision from your smartphone? Over 3/4 of people saying yes. Then on the right-hand side, where did you execute that purchase? Overwhelmingly, 76% of people saying, well, I went to the store, right? So location, me here now playing a role. I'm looking for a pair of shoes. I like those shoes. Where can I buy the shoes? I'll go buy the shoes right now. Second up, 59% of people saying, I researched on a smartphone, purchased online. That could be as simple as my friend told me about this kind of jacket when I was out at lunch. I looked on my phone. There's no stores around me in Chicago that sell that jacket, but I see that they have an online store. I'm going to, when I get back to my desk, go ahead and buy that jacket online. And then third category there is purchased on the smartphone, whether that's an m-commerce transaction through the browser or potentially a mobile wallet transaction. And I think our bet long range is that that smartphone purchase category of 35% will continue to inch up and become equal to or just shy of the in-store as merchants and brands come online with their capabilities for m-commerce. So we think about mobile in the shopper spectrum. We've kind of thought about it in terms of 3 spheres of influence. Mobile playing a role in the aisle with a product, mobile playing a role at the store level, which is much more about a retailer relationship, and then playing a role beyond the store out in the larger world where really the bulk of the me here now behavior is taking place. So what do I kind of mean by that? Well, in the aisle, again, you heard me talk about this a little bit in the CDJ. I think mobile is really about connecting with products in the aisle. So whether that's creating SMS opt-ins off of a Necker or of an aisle violator or some other piece of shopper marketing collateral, whether it's simply having a robust mobile search strategy that's allowing you to understand how a consumer is going to shop for a particular product and search when they're in the store. Product reviews, obviously Yelp playing a huge role there, and also code scanning behavior. And we're not willing to bet on any one code being dominant in the space. I don't even know if it's a productive conversation, because I think what's going to happen is different products will have different needs, and consumers will have different needs from products in terms of what information they get and when they're in the aisle, and there's different formats of codes to facilitate that. For example, higher value products might decide that there's more value in incorporating QR codes, whereas lower end products like a can of tuna fish might decide, you know what, just scanning the barcode to unlock a coupon and the barcode we already have is good enough. At the store level, it starts to become much more about the relationship between the consumer and the store. And that's not to say that there's not a way for CPG to play there, but it is clearly on the behest of the retailer if we're going to be able to do that. So that's things like Shopkick. You see the logo there where I'm gaining loyalty by simply visiting the store. I'm picking up points for the way that I shop. Foursquare is clearly a way to have a relationship with the retailer much more than a product in the aisle. Self-fire coupon service, Google Wallet, obviously. All these things needing to be implemented at the store retailer level in order to be meaningful for a brand and for a consumer. And then finally, out in the world, and this is where kind of things get really exciting, is what are the ways that the phone and location in particular are playing a role beyond the store in the larger world that the consumer is interacting with. So that's things like social media, obviously messaging and CRM play a role there. Specifically, one execution that we were excited to take advantage of earlier this year, again with our partner Placecast, was the Shop Alerts pilot. And the Shop Alerts pilot was a geo-fenced messaging program that ran in 4 cities for about 10 weeks in the early part of the year. We had 4 brands from the agency participate in the program. If you're not familiar with geofencing, essentially these are invisible fences in the sky. So the idea is that you pick a specific geographic point on the map, call it Walmart, and draw a radius around the store And then for a subscribed consumer, that's someone who's already opted in for your text messaging channel. When they enter into that radius around the store, was a half mile away, it triggers a communication to them about a specific brand or product or an offer. So we had a number of different clients experiment with this, and we had some really exciting results that you can see on the left. My favorite one is the one that's the second from the last. One of the participating brands that we had in the program, these are results based on post-program survey, and so we had consumers actually reporting that 22% of people that participated in the program actually purchased the product at the store that was triggering the message and that we were directing them to. So clearly consumers wanting these location services and finding tremendous value in them, and just a big result, an amazing opportunity when we're getting sensitive to location and figuring out how to really take advantage of that me, here, now type attitude. So the second section I want to kind of talk about is payment, and you hear a lot in the news today about mobile wallet and kind of how the mobile payment space is going. I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit and link it back up with the conversation that we just had about location. This is, I think, what everyone thinks about mobile wallet is kind of solving the George Costanza problem. So why should I carry around this leather thing that's filled with all kinds of junk and receipts when it seems like I should be able to just put everything on my phone? And I think that the basic conceit of mobile wallet kind of is that. But what I want to talk about is that I think that defining mobile wallet just by a replacement for the physical wallet in your pocket or just by a tap pay mechanism is a little bit limiting. And so here's what I mean by that. So if you think back to what we just talked about, that kind of aisle store beyond framework of how location works in the view of the consumer, the mobile wallet is really set up in the same way, right? So you have the consumer-owned device. Then you have at the aisle level personalized offers and deals. You have the membership or loyalty program. That's a relationship with the store. And then you have the tap phone to pay, and that's really a relationship beyond the store with a credit card issuer or potentially Google or any one of these things. And this diagram is courtesy of ISIS, I should mention. It's a really great visualization. The mobile wallet space is projected to blast off in the next 5 years. This is a slide courtesy of Citibank. And just tremendous growth internationally projected for mobile payments and mobile wallet. And if you think about we're already thinking about some of the international implications of this, but I think the most exciting piece of this is that this is data that Citibank is looking at. So clearly financial institutions, telecom operators, all looking at the space as a tremendous opportunity. And the key to unlocking it all is really getting it to work with the consumer and the retailer. Just a snapshot then of a few of the big players in the space. You know, Google Wallet obviously launched with a lot of fanfare here in the last couple of months. I was actually in Macy's last week and noticed that all their registers are outfitted with that now, and saw Gap come online with that as well. ISIS is another exciting one. It's a joint venture between a number of telecom companies. They're gearing up for launch sometime next year, and probably going to make a huge play in the space as well. And I think the elephant in the room is Apple. We know that Apple's iTunes store could be phenomenally successful as a mobile payment solution because they already have our credit card numbers, and we know that consumers are already comfortable buying things via digital and via Apple. It's just a matter of when are they going to kind of light that up, and what handset is it going to be. So clearly keeping an eye on them. I think this distinction between NFC and over-the-air services is a critical one for the conversation because I think we need to evolve our understanding of mobile wallet away from tap and pay. Yes, it's tap and pay, but over-the-air services, those are services that because your secure credentials are on the phone can be delivered that don't necessarily have to do with purchasing, become the more exciting ones. So again, here's some diagrams from our partners at ISIS that kind of start to explain the difference between purchase as tap and pay and over-the-air services that can impact a consumer because of the presence of near-field secure credentials on the phone. So in the first example here, you have my demo girl, Jane. She's at the bus stop. She sees an ad for a sweater, 2 for 1. She uses the phone to capture that deal, visits the store, in the store also sees that there's 50% off shoes. Who can't pass that up? So she grabs that offer. The wallet, when she taps and pays, compresses all of that value into one seamless, frictionless transaction, and she's out the door. But I think the point is at the back end of that user flow, the loyalty aspect for that retailer to understand that that's how she wants to interact. So I'm going to then talk about a much more advanced over-the-air solution, which is the travel solution. I think this really starts to get to the idea that mobile wallet can go way beyond tap and pay. So here's Jane in a travel scenario. She's booked her whole itinerary. She gets to the airport. She's using mobile wallet and a boarding pass feature to check in through security. She's using it to check in at the gate. When she arrives at her destination, the combination of GPS and secure credentials in the mobile wallet, allowing her to move through and just unlock the car and drive away as opposed to waiting in line and doing paperwork. And then even at the hotel, skipping the queue for check-in and actually just going right to the door of the hotel room and being able to unlock the door and walk in. So I think those are just ways to try to understand that mobile wallet, yes, it's about payment, but it's really about how to get the secure credential of that particular user activated across all of these different touch points in a way that's going to be valuable to them. This is probably the most overused example of the year, but I'll talk about it briefly just because I think Tesco is actually starting to get this right. So if you're not familiar with this, Tesco is a large grocer, and what they've done is they've actually created an out-of-home version of the store. So it's life-size, backlit, out-of-home advertising space that they've converted to look exactly like their in-store shopping experience from products on the shelf. Everything is tagged with a QR code, and the idea behind this is simple, right? People are waiting for the train, and they can actually take advantage of that time to shop us, fill up a digital basket, and buy it right then and have those grocery items delivered to their home later that night. So I think, Tesco doing a great job of paying off on that time saver opportunity of mobile, and also starting to look at mobile wallet as much larger than just purchase, but how are we actually playing a role in the consumer's life. So with the little time we have left, I'll pass it over to Chris Miller to finish up on social.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. So as we talked a lot about mobile, and just recently as he wrapped up in terms of how mobile really works in the payment space, we think there's another interesting thing for you to start to take a look at. This is probably a little farther out than today, but it's worth looking at, especially as we think about behaviors and where that technology is going. It's really the idea we're talking to clients about of live stream, which is really moving from my status to my life. And what we mean by that is we think that there's this race for social search. And on one side, there's Google+, which is all about owning those web pages and how those relate to search and bringing that back into that social with Google+. Then there's the other side, which is where Facebook and Twitter are sitting and own that friendship relationship, but bringing that back into how it relates to web pages. So why is that behavior really important to mobile? Well, we think if you look at Facebook's timeline, and on the left you see Patrick's current Facebook page. Patrick, hope it's okay. I'm sharing your Facebook page to a couple hundred people. And on the right you see that how it would appear in the timeline view. And so the idea of live stream is now changing from me publishing out my status as I'm doing things, as you heard Patrick talk about earlier, to an ambient relationship that I have already set up. So if you're a Spotify user and a Facebook user right now, you can listen to music on Spotify and not even be on Facebook, and it's publishing back out to your Facebook friends. The same thing as you mentioned earlier of having Foursquare hooked into Twitter or into Facebook. So what you're seeing now is this connection of things that I do being shared out as a live stream. And what more perfect place would that be than in mobile, because it's always with me no matter where I am, and capturing that information in. And in the other area here, as you think about live streaming, look at this example here. So for instance, as you have a profile that's been updated, a brand that's in here and publishing back out to where that subset of friends. So this is a Facebook example. We can also look at an example here next from Google+. So a different take on it. I'm assuming most of the audience is familiar with both platforms, but this really enabling you to interact with, as a brand, interacting with consumers. And so as we've seen the brand pages for Google Plus have launched within the last couple of days. So we think it's important to start to look at this idea of live stream, of how you start to create those connection points. Because ultimately, I think as you've heard throughout the whole presentation, we really believe that mobile is mandatory, mobile is everywhere, and mobile is now. And I'll turn it over to our moderator, I think, for some questions that have come in.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Patrick. Great presentation. We're now ready to open the floor to your questions as I display on the screen Patrick and Chris's contact information. As a reminder, to participate in our Q&A, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area and then click on the Submit button. And we'll get to as many questions as we can in the limited time that's left. First up, Nicholas expressed that he was trying to decide between mobile sites versus apps. What's your feelings about this, Patrick? I mean, it's just like, should we be building applications on mobile apps, or should we be optimizing our sites first for mobile browsing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I see in the queue here there's a number of people that have asked about that. I think the bottom line is that with the emergence of HTML5 and the dominance of HTML5, I think that it's forcing that question, and I think the answer is mobile web. I think we've been counseling our clients that for a variety of reasons, really developing a great mobile web strategy, making sure that it's not a campaign strategy, that's actually a persistent enterprise kind of property in the way that your .com property is, and being sure that you're committed to maintaining that and making it useful for consumers with HTML5 in the mobile web is absolutely the way to go. As a first step. That's not to say that as you evolve into mobile marketing, you can't have a reason to have an application, or in some cases for some of our clients, we're talking about developing portfolios of applications. As we get to know our needs of our consumer segments better, we get to refine our approach, and I think that's when we start to see our ability to kind of diversify and make some choices. As a rule of thumb, what I've been counseling our clients with is definitely have a mobile website. Definitely make sure that you're leveraging HTML5 to provide a great experience for smartphones today and for the flood of smartphones that we know are coming in the future. There was a quick side question about m.URL structure versus a separate URL. Like I said, I think that it's got to be easy in, easy out. There's a variety of ways to do that. I think that some of the easiest ways are simply by running some scripting on your .com that pushes people into either a directory seamlessly or whether it's set up to push them to an m.URL. I think those are choices you can make based on your IT structure, but I think the point is don't make the consumer have to make that choice for you. And then I think in terms of web versus apps, apps are great for 5 reasons, right? They kind of can leverage so they can store a secure information like username and password, so you don't have to log in every time. They can use the GPS antenna really efficiently. They can use the accelerometer really efficiently. They can store offline massive amounts of data. And then they can tap into the massive processor speed that's on the phone. So I think if you're thinking about how are you going to execute in mobile, and one of those 5 criteria are a mandatory for how you're going to execute, you should be looking at an application. But if you're thinking to yourself, we don't really need the accelerometer, or I don't need to store massive amounts of data, or I don't need to store secure credentials for the user, it's much more efficient and speedier and longer range thinking, I think, to develop for mobile web.
And this fits right into the strategy that was expressed early on in the presentation about following the behavior rather than following the technology. So
yeah, I think that's a great point.
Awesome. Well, I have a question for Chris here. This comes from George, and it basically is asking, will mobile advertising or mobile marketing ever overtake traditional advertising, meaning TV, print, mail? Or is it something that, you're going to see kind of a blending that will continue to happen over years?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's more the latter. It's more of a blending. 10 years, I think we'll see continued technology innovation and change. I think the big thing is to look at the spend changes that are happening today, which we talked about earlier, that are happening in the mobile space, and then how people, from a behavior standpoint, are really interacting with content and experiences. I think the big thing is the convergence that we'll start to see in 10 years. I don't know if in 10 years we're going to make such a big difference between is it a TV buy or is it a tablet buy or is it a mobile buy because of the multi-devicing and experience that we're seeing among consumers using those. So I think it's going to be more about how, from one side, we plan those together, but then two, the behaviors that we'll start to see. So I think in 10 years, the other piece will be what do we consider television? If I'm watching TV on my tablet, which I am today, I would imagine 10 years from now that behavior will continue to grow. So that'll be the big thing is the convergence and change within those spaces.
Awesome. I have a follow-up question here for you, Chris. Someone is asking, Dennis is asking, what are the consumer boundaries with all this? Are we going to see a consumer backlash in the next 2 to 3 years because of just bad marketing via mobile devices?
I don't know if we'll see a broad-based consumer backlash. I think there's a couple of things you have to be careful of. I think privacy is obviously one. There's a lot of data, especially if you start to look at mobile wallet that's being generated and how that's being used. I think we're seeing things like, then there's a question earlier about QR codes, where there's proliferation of QR codes, and we really tell our clients, create a great campaign that uses the QR code, just don't put the QR code on there. So I think in some cases we've heard like backlashes against devices like that because you're not either creating a great call to action on it or you're not creating a great payoff that makes it worth my time when I click on it. And so that one bad experience means I'm less likely to click on that or select that QR code the next time that I see it. And then I think as marketers, we continue to have responsibility in terms of how we use the data and how we message. So things like geolocation, if I'm opted into a program and you're delivering something to me that's relevant and I like, that's great. If I'm getting something that seems a little bit creepy or off or strange, that starts to turn me off to the brand. So I think that data management will be as key as brand management will be.
I have a question here for Patrick from Matt, asking about the difference between smartphones versus tablets. There seems to be a divergence between the two because one's a big screen, one's a small screen. The problems about optimizing for each of them are starting to crop up. And how do you balance between the two? And are there emerging technologies that will specifically detect between the browsing activity of the different devices? And how can you optimize for those situations?
Sure. So that's 5 great questions. The answer to the first one is the tablet is really interesting because it's entirely new. So I think another concept that we didn't necessarily address in here, but that Chris and I have been spending a lot of time talking about has been the concept of multiscreening, where we're seeing a trend in consumer behavior that involves using screens together. So whether that's I'm using my phone and my PC at the same time, or I'm using my phone and I'm watching TV, or using all 3 at the same time, we're seeing growth in not only the amount of time spent per screen, but also the amount of time that people are spending dividing their attention between 2 or 3 screens at the same time. And what's interesting about tablets is now there's actually 4 screens in the mix. That I don't think the tablet is a replacement for the mobile phone for consumers. It's simply additive, where if you're a really sophisticated mobile user, you're not abandoning the PC, but what you're doing is moving a lot of your PC-based activities to the phone because they're easier to do. But I know for me, I still need to go back and crack open Outlook on my laptop now and again just to file email and check my calendar and things like that, right? The tablet is something entirely new, and I think we're still kind of working with it to try to understand it. So we're thinking of it as different. I think that it's hard to try and say, oh, the tablet's a mobile device or the tablet's a living room device, because we know that it kind of is both and it's neither. And often what we're seeing in the research is that actually it's a companion device, that particularly for TV watchers, the tablet is playing an increasingly important role in what they're doing in their living room. So I hope that helps. I don't know if that answers the question head on. But then I think the second half of the question is, what do we do about that? Yes, there are technologies out there. I think smart HTML5 development is a critical place where we can begin trying to incorporate experiences that appear and function in custom ways against the stratified device landscape and still retain a level of control and consistency over the overall presentation. So at DraftFCB, our global mobile partner is Velti, and we take good advantage of Velti's technology from a device detection point of view to know where a request for a page is coming from, whether it's a tablet or a phone, and what kind of phone, what kind of tablet browser, and then being able to leverage the 5ML capabilities of the platform to deliver a great HTML5 experience on a device-level basis that gives a custom experience so you're not making any trade-offs there. So there's definitely, that's our choice of technology that we use for our client business, and there's certainly a lot of solutions out there that you can explore to do that.
Now, I have one last question. I'm going to throw this up as a toss-up, so either of you can answer this one. What are the barriers to smartphone adoption? I mean, there's still such a huge install base in essentially feature phones that have no support for a lot of these new technologies that we've been discussing. How do you get around that? How do you market to them? And how do you convince consumers to become part of this smartphone generation?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, because I'm going to kind of fundamentally disagree with the assumption that's in the question that there's still this massive penetration of feature phones. Yes, they're out there. Our data shows that in a matter of months, if it hasn't happened already, just because our data is trailing, that over 50% of consumers and almost most urban consumers will have smartphones in their hands. Certainly, we'll be moving towards 75% over the next 18 months. So I think from a I'm almost going to flip it around and say, by the time we're reaching 60, 65, 70% penetration in smartphones, how much do you care about the people that don't have a smartphone?
And the big advantage, too, is that the carriers are doing that for us, right? So they're out selling it, so now the smartphone is free with your 2-year plan. So I think as Patrick was talking about, over the next months, you're seeing those 2-year contracts that are coming up for renewal from those people 2 years ago who are at that point weren't quite ready to spend the $50 or $99 or $129 for a smartphone. Now that comes free with their new plan.
Right. You can get an iPhone free now, right, if you sign a 2-year contract with AT&T. So I think the question for us, I think the question about feature phone, how do you address feature phone, is becoming less and less important. But then if it's still important to you, potentially in certain markets and with certain demographics, that's still a question. I think there's still ways to do it. I think there's clever ways to play in lower-end web experiences, so WAP and XHTML code experiences that are not as sexy as HTML5 and touchscreen, but still can get the job done if you're doing your homework right about being bite-sized, relevant, disposable, and really getting that time killer, time saver formula right. It's not going to be sexy, but you can still create that kind of experience on a lower-end phone, provided they can get to the web. And if they can't get to the web, SMS works for everybody.
Right. Well, I got to take it back, guys. We've reached the end of our time. If we did not get to your question, Patrick or Chris will follow up with you later by email or some other method that they will tell you about, because we're going to try to get to as many of the questions as possible offline. Thank you for attending Ad Age's custom webcast sponsored by DraftFCB. You can also view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link you used to attend today. You will receive an email as soon as the archive is ready. On behalf of our guests, Patrick Moorhead and Chris Miller from DraftFCB, thank you for your time. Have a great day.